John Rantall is a name that won't mean much to many of you. After all, he plied his trade way back in the 1960s and 70s. Suffice to say, he is a member of the team of the century at 2 clubs. Those of you who remember him are in for a treat. Those of you not familiar with him should do yourselves a favour and hear his story. Consider this a mandatory history lesson. Welcome, Mopsy.
Thank you very much, Michael.
I've always tried to work out why you were so good. You were just 6 feet tall, you didn't have a huge leap, and you weren't quick, and we're all agreed on that, right?
Correct.
Why were you so effective?
Well, I suppose my greatest assets were my judgment. I could read the play. It wouldn't matter if I played on a quicker player. I could always get there at the same time by using my judgment. And I had good balance.
Geez, you played on a nice mix of players, didn't you? You played on a lot of the great full forwards of the day. Hudson.
Yes.
Who else back then?
Hudson,
Wade, yep.
Jezelenko,
McKenna,
Hart. I played on them all. Anyone that was any good, I played on him in the 70s.
Yet you're famous, certainly with me and others, for your battles with Lee Matthews, who was better known as a ground player.
Yes, yes. When I went to North in 73, 74 and 75, I had a lot of battles with Lee. I'd have to pick Lee up when he came off the ball into the forward pocket.
He played, there were 8 games between North and Hawthorn during your time at North. Lethal kicked 15 goals. And he did say to me this week, I rang him and I said, fact or fiction, John Rantall used to generally beat you. He said, put it this way, I didn't kick many goals against North when Rantall was there. That's high praise.
I suppose it is. But I enjoyed playing on Lee because I wasn't giving away height. And usually when he came off the ball, he was a little tired. But I fancied myself in the air. I knew I was a good mark for my inches. So, and when the ball hit the ground, you know, I had enough balance to be able to keep him away from.
You know, I never remember you losing your feet.
No. It was one of those things that was a real strength for me, and actually, if I talk about the player that was the hardest player I ever played on, and that was Darryl Baldock. One of his greatest skills, you couldn't knock him off his feet.
No, low centre of gravity.
Low centre of gravity, and he was just a freak.
That 75 grand final, Mopsy, when you finally got a premiership representing North Melbourne, Lee kicked 2 behinds that day.
Yes. Yes, Lee wasn't too happy.
Now, when Lee wasn't happy, he generally tried to sort of square the ledger physically. Did he do that to you?
Yeah, he tried many times, and I suppose for about 5 or 6 years, Lee had quite a few swipes at me, but luckily he missed, and I suppose my longevity in the game depended on me being fully aware of where the other player was.
The opposite end of the spectrum, Robert Walls, Carlton's premiership centre-half forward, probably 6'4". Wallsy said to me, quote, I could never get a kick on him, that being you.
Yeah, I played.
So you're conceding 4 inches to Wallsy?
Yes. I played on. Wallsy played centre-half forward. I used to pick him up at centre-half back. Look, Wallsy took no prisoners. He was a very, very tough opponent, and Wallsy could dish it out. If you dished it back to him, he wasn't one of these players that stopped there. He would want to go and dish it back out. He was never beaten. And
did you give it back to those? If someone hit you, would you square up with them?
I would square up, and I think that you square up within the rules. I mean, and as Norm Smith used to say...
There were no rules in your day?
No, but it was a tougher game, in other words, and there was a fair bit of freedom that was allowed to happen.
What's that mean?
It means that if you got the chance to run through someone, you did it.
Run through? Where were your arms at the time?
You're supposed to keep them down, but sometimes they don't stay down.
John, the original form of free agency came in 1973.
Yes.
John Rantall, Barry Davis and Doug Wade crossed from their clubs and joined North Melbourne and duly won a premiership in 1975.
Yes.
Ronnie Joseph, who was the secretary of the most adventurous secretary of all in 1970s, said that you were very difficult to entice out of South, even though the South was down near the bottom.
Well, I suppose that's the nature of me. I knew I was leaving South in 72 because Norm Smith had been sacked. And I thought that he was very harshly done by. The announcement came over at VFL Park when I was watching the first semi-final, and I turned to my wife and I said, I'm out of here.
And you were captain, weren't you?
I was captain, yes. And look, Norm was a fantastic coach, mentor. He was everything to me. He probably turned my whole career around. But I still took a long time to make a decision.
Yeah.
I was the last one to make the decision, and I didn't make it until one night Aylett and Joseph and Mantello turned up at my doorstep. And they walked in and they said, look, John, we're here not to muck around. We've signed Barassi, we've signed Davis, we've signed Wade. You're the last person. We want you to make a decision now. What other incentive can we offer you? And I said, no. I said, look, this has got to suit me. I'm coming, but I just need time to make a decision. And with that, they had a Gladstone bag there. And they opened this Gladstone bag and there was a wad of a bundle that big, and they threw it on the couch where my son was sitting, and it bounced onto the floor, and he ran over and grabbed it and thought it was a footy. But in that bundle was $10,000.
$10,000.
$10,000, and Joseph said to me, that's yours, put it in your pocket. We'll pay you $10,000 this year, $12,000 next year, $14,000 the year after. And I'd just bought a house in Mulgrave for $13,000. I had 2 mortgages on it. I couldn't believe.
Not any longer.
Not any longer. That's right. I couldn't believe what was happening.
So was the 10 grand that they threw at you out of the Gladstone bag, was that a sign-on fee?
That was a sign-on fee.
And then it was 10, 12 and 14?
Yeah, so in that first year I got 20,000.
Wow.
And an average house in Melbourne in those days was 13,000.
Did Norm Smith get involved? He did? Yeah.
Yes.
Norm Smith was a mentor of Ron Barassi's.
Yes.
And as I understand it, Norm sort of suggested to you that if you wanted to win a premiership, which all players do, you should go to North.
Well, Norm said to me, go, and every time Barassi came over to see Norm, who was sick at home with a terminal illness, Norm would say to him, have you got him yet? And Barassi has relayed the story to me later on, that Norm was responsible for them really going out after me.
So you were 29 at the time you left South?
Yes.
Played 170 odd games?
Yes.
Did you have any misgivings, or did you have any lack of faith in your own ability to win a role at North?
It was tough because I wasn't frightened of coming under Ron Barassi's coaching, because they were identical in lots of ways.
Smithy and Ron.
Smithy brought Ron up as a legacy child, and I was quite happy. Brass was a 37-year-old man. Norm was a 57-year-old man. That's the difference. That's the only difference I could see. So I was happy with that. But there was a little bit of unrest at North with some of the fringe players there, so we really had to play well. And in the first practice game, I ended up busting my shoulder, and I came under a little bit of flack because a few people thought that, I wasn't going to live up to what it was. But no, look, it was the best 3 years of my life.
Yeah, so 74 you win the best and fairest at North.
Yes. 75
you're in the best 2 or 3 in the premiership win.
Yes, yes.
Now explain this to me, Mopsy. The end of 75, your last game in blue and white colours is a premiership win, and you decide to go back to South Melbourne for 1976.
I had a little bird in my ear that was kept whispering and saying that we can do this at
Is that bird called Ron Joseph?
That bird was Ron Joseph. Not many people know, but Ron was coming back to South Melbourne. He was going to revamp the board, and I was going to be part of that revamp. And I mean, after winning the premiership with North, I couldn't think of anything better than doing it at the club that I played for.
Because your heart was still at South Melbourne?
It was still at South Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I suppose I was convinced that maybe something like that could happen.
So you've signed to go back to the Swans?
I signed to go back to the Swans, yes.
And what happened with the bloke who signed you, RJ?
He rang me 3 days before Christmas in 75 and said, I'm not coming back.
Did he?
I said to Ron, I said, where does that leave me? He said, oh, you'll be right, you've got a good contract.
You must have thought then, what have I done?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
You walked out on the premiership club.
Yeah. I suppose I could have stayed there and played in a few more premierships, but that wasn't my dream. My dream was to be able to do it with the Swans.
It got ugly, didn't it? You wanted to go back to South.
Yep.
North didn't want to lose you.
Yep. Yes, at that time there was a poaching fee.
100 grand?
100 grand.
Yep.
And Ron Joseph had said to me, be careful when you go and talk to Alan Aylett and let him know that you're leaving, that no one's following you. I went out to his studio and spoke to Alan, and Alan seemed to be quite okay with it.
You went to Alan's dental surgery?
Yeah, dental surgery. And he said, okay. And on the way back to South Melbourne, I was being followed over Kingsway. And I shot up into the markets at South Melbourne and sat in a hotel there, and all of a sudden the door opened and a guy stuck his head in and then disappeared. But for the next week, I rang Ron Joseph and said, look, Ron, I'm being followed. He said, I thought you might be. He said, watch it for the next week. So this car sat outside my house for a whole week.
So it was a private eye?
It was a private eye. And I used to... We had two cars. I'd drive out one way and my wife would drive out the other way. But, I mean, I suppose you get a little bit scared about what's happening, you know. It gets bigger than big.
You mentioned that the 3 best years of your life were at North. When you realised that you're at South and Ronnie Joseph wasn't there, did you regret it? Did you wish that you'd stayed with the Kangas?
Yes, I did. I must admit, I felt as though the task was going to be too big. Mm-hmm. And I did worry for a while that I'd made the wrong decision. But I was there, I was signed up, so I had to get over it. And yeah, it was a bit hard.
So what was it like back at the Bloods?
Well, I suppose I relate it to being at school when you're picking up sides to play keepers off. You always want to get on the good side because you get a lot more touches.
So in 75, your team wins the flag and the team you went to had won 2 games. And you were to play there, you played at South for another 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't end well, Mopsy, did it, at South?
No, it didn't end well. I ended up in 79, 3 games short of the record.
The AFL record?
The AFL record. Ian Stewart came and spoke to me.
Ian Stewart was the coach?
He was the coach. He spoke to me in 79 and said, I want you to retire. And I said, look, I'm 3 games off breaking the record. I'd love to give it one big shot. In 80, and I had a lot of convincing to do, and he said, okay, I'll let you do that, provided you do all the training. I did the 10Ks, the 5Ks.
Which you'd never done previously.
I'd never done them before,
No.
and I trained my butt off, and the Monday before the first game, I played in all the NAB Cups. Never been spoken to about my form. I thought it was okay. And on the Monday night I trained and I had to pull up because I had tendinitis. I'd been getting some needles. I spoke to Stewie and he said, look, go and get yourself ready for against Geelong. I went in and had a shower, and then Stewie came in and said, haven't got you in my best 22. I got better half-back flankers than you. And I just exploded. I said, look, I could never believe another word that came out of your mouth. and I stormed out. And I knew the next day that it was never going to be mended because not the president, no one came near me. My manager couldn't get to anyone. So, you know, it was it. I mean, okay, I was 36. Fair enough. The only thing I objected about it was the way it was done. It could have been done. He could have went to me and said, look, sit this one out and we'll nurse you through next week. But so
we're talking the week before round one of the 1980 season?
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
And suddenly the club that you'd... And to be fair, you'd given so much to the South Melbourne Footy Club. You were their games record holder at the time. Mm-hmm. No support from any element there?
No support from anyone. It was kept under wraps. Look, it took me a while to get over it. I struggled with that.
Did you go back? Did you ever go back to... In that period of the time, that was the end of it. You walked out?
I walked out.
Yeah.
I never went back. No, I was never asked to go back. On the Monday, they said, no. My manager couldn't get in touch with them. So, you know, I knew that I was out in the cold. I knew that Stewie was going to keep me out. So I just sucked it up.
So you crossed to Fitzroy. North Melbourne and Fitzroy came to you and said that they were prepared to have you back. And North was prepared to have you back. Fitzroy was prepared to give you an opportunity,
yeah,
right?
they were prepared to give me a chance to break the record. Exactly what Stewie said. But I chose Fitzroy and I put it off for 3 or 4 weeks because I couldn't train.
Because of your knee? Because
of the tendonitis. Yeah. I finished the injections the night I went to have the first training night at Fitzroy and was hoping I could get back on the ground, and I did. But I was struggling.
So you only played 6 games? 6 games with Fitzroy. Ironically, you broke the AFL record that was held by the Fitzroy legend Kevin Murray.
Yes.
Yeah.
I went and spoke to Kev.
Did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
how was he about it?
He was great. He said, Mopsy, by all means. And I mean, before I signed on with Fitzroy, I went and spoke to Kevin because it was his record. And I mean, if he had said no, well, I wouldn't have done it. Was
there a hollow ring to it when you broke the record at Fitzroy, given that you were so entrenched at South Melbourne?
Yes, I would have loved to have done it at the Swans. It was a real hollow feeling, and that's no disrespect to Fitzroy. I've got to say I appreciate what Fitzroy did for me. I appreciate what Bill Stevens did for me.
Did Billy Stevens think that you could help his footy team, or did he want to give you the opportunity to break the record?
He thought I could contribute, and as it turned out, I couldn't because of the tendonitis.
Your last game in Fitzroy colours was against the Swans, wasn't it?
Yes.
How'd that feel?
It was tough. It was really tough. Look, I had a lot of mates there, and a lot of those guys were very supportive of me when I got the heave-ho, but they were out to give me a hard time. But it was
even though you were an elder statesman of that footy club, there's still a bit of mouthing off, was there?
Oh yeah, there was quite a bit, but I mean I took it in all good faith. I mean I would have done the same.
Where's your heart lie now, in terms of AFL clubs?
Look, if the Swans and North were playing tomorrow, I could sit in that stand and I wouldn't care who won. I'd be happy with either side.
Well, you're in the Swans team of the century in the back pocket, and you're on a half-back flank in North team of the century. That's a major achievement at North. You played 3 years there.
Yes.
And made it into the team of the century.
70 games I played with North.
Yeah.
Look, I had 3 very good years with a wonderful club and a fantastic coach and some unbelievable players. And I think in that 75 grand final side, there's 7 players in the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Out of that one team.
I was going to ask you, played with 2 out-and-out champions at South Melbourne in Skilton and Bedford.
Yes.
And at North, I'm going to leave someone out here, but there's Greg and Schimmelbusch and Blight and Croswell and Glendinning and players of that ilk.
And Dench.
And Dench. Who's the best bloke you played with?
Oh,
The
look,
most talented, the most capable on
oh,
the
the
footy
most
field.
capable. Look, Wayne Schimmelbusch. I loved his endeavour. He was never beaten. I mean, I used to marvel at what that kid could do.
Yep.
Keith Gregg.
Yeah. And they were on opposite wings, but they were
Yes.
contrasting styles, weren't
Yes,
they?
yes. And I loved to play with either one of them.
Yeah.
I suppose the most gifted player is probably Keith Gregg. He was terrible. But, Skilton, an amazing player. Not overly quick. I mean, if we lined up for a 100-metre sprint, Skilton would be last.
1970, Mopsy, you're playing for South Melbourne. The Swans make the finals under Norm Smith.
Yes.
You're playing St Kilda in what was then the first semi-final. Must have been a dream come true for Skilts. He had never played in the final to that point. How did he cope with that?
Well, it was amazing. Norm Smith was coaching us, and it was probably an unbelievable feat because we had, it wasn't a star-studded side, but we'd made the finals for the first time, and Norm got a bus to leave from South Melbourne to the MCG. We were all going together as a team, and I remember we pulled up outside the MCG at 12:30. Skilton was sitting in front of me, and he was shaking, and all the players have got out of the bus, and Skilton stands up and he said, Mopsy, he said, will you come here and stand in front of me? And I said, what for? He said, it'd be my bloody luck. He said, I'll step out of the bus and break my ankle and won't be able to play. He was that nervous about playing, and that was his only ever final.
Yeah, and he went into the game injured anyway.
He went into
the
game with a crook injury.
So at that point he had, I think, 220 odd games and 3 Brownlows.
Yes.
And then, sadly, I remember watching the game, his thigh was bandaged, wasn't it?
That's right. And
did he have a hamstring?
yeah, it was the top part of his thigh.
Yeah. And you blokes got cleaned up?
We got cleaned up. I can remember, strangely enough, I mean, I'd played, it was the first final I'd played in, and there was 104,000 there, which was an amazing effort. And Norm Smith got me to line up on Rossi Smith. And I mean, I'm a back man, usually picking up centre-half backs and full backs. Ross Smith must have ran 40 mile in the first quarter. I needed an oxygen tent. I couldn't keep up with him, so I went
you were
back
playing
to
in the back
full-back.
pocket?
I went back to full-back on Barry Lawrence.
1977, John, you're at South. I think, did South play in the final that year?
Yes.
Yeah. And North go on, your old team goes on to win their second premiership in 3 years. How did you feel?
Yeah, I felt, look, I was so pleased they did. I mean, in 76, I can remember Ron Barassi asking me to come and talk to Keith Gregg because they'd chosen Keith Gregg to play on Lee Matthews.
Really? So you're a South player, and Barassi asks you to come back
and I went
to
across,
give Greggy some tips.
Yeah, on the week before the grand final.
Gee, interesting matchup, Keith Gregg on Lee Matthews.
Yeah, yes, it was. It was. Yeah, and you know, I mean, I felt the pinch then.
Yeah,
it would have been lovely to still be there. And then when they won it in 77 and the draw, yeah, I must admit, I was sitting in the stand, and yeah, it was great to see them win it.
Let's go back to the South Melbourne situation, and probably the most divisive period in the history of the footy club. The battle between the people who wanted to keep South Melbourne at South and the forces who wanted to take the club to Sydney.
Yes.
And my memory is that the Keep South at South group had you as their nominal coach, correct?
Correct.
You were appointed coach?
Yes.
What happened from there?
I started training a group of young players that didn't want to go to Sydney, and I had the older players who wanted to secure their futures and be in Sydney. So the Keep South at South, they were trying to get their act together and get sponsors, and meanwhile I was training the younger kids.
Who was in your group?
A couple of the names, the Morwoods,
Yep.
two of the young Morwoods, Silvio Fascini, There was a couple of others. And I would negotiate to sort of try and do a contract with, say, Barry Round, and we'd agree, and then Barry would come back to me 2 days later and say, oh, look, they've offered me such and such. And,
they being the other side of the footy club.
The other side of the footy club. And Alan Aylett rang me up from the VFL and said, look, if you can get these two warring parties together, I'll win you a premiership in
Sydney.
In Sydney.
Yeah.
And I said, Alan, there's no way now, and I can do that because half wanted to go and half didn't want to go. And finally, the VFL came to me and said, well, look, John, if you don't resign, we'll disband in the Swans. They will not be a side anymore, and we'll put a side in Sydney and we'll call it something else.
Wow.
And that's when I said, OK, I'll resign.
Did all this sort of stuff, this division at South, and the way you left the club initially, did you lose friends? Did you lose friends of the footy club over those things?
Yeah. Yep.
Did you?
Yes.
Well, Stewie would be one. Did you talk to Ian Stewart?
No. I haven't. No, I haven't. Well,
would you if you crossed paths?
Yeah, I think I don't think you can go on forever holding a grudge. Yeah, I guess I would. I must admit I haven't, and I had the opportunity at one stage to talk to him, but I didn't.
You didn't. You chose not to.
I chose not to. Yeah.
Did he speak to you?
He tried.
The John Rantall I know, I'm surprised at that.
Yeah, I suppose. I think what happened hit me really hard. It caught me by surprise. I never thought.
This is going back to when you were effectively sacked by the Swans.
Yeah, I never thought that would happen. I mean, in my wildest dreams, I never thought that. I mean, you can usually talk through things, but I never thought it'd be done that way.
When you look back on the footy career, are there regrets other than that? There's clearly the way you left South, but are there any other regrets?
None.
No.
Look,
you don't regret going to Fitzroy?
No, I don't. It was all an adventure. I mean, I never thought in my wildest dreams when I came down from the bush, I wanted to play one game. I never thought I'd end up playing 336, and it just got better as it went. Okay, it ended up a bit skew-whiff in the end, but no, I've got no regrets whatsoever.
Hey, Mobsy, it's been a great career, and you were genuinely one of my favourite players with the Swans, even because you were working so hard in such an undermanned team, and then to go across the north and get your just desserts and play in a premiership team. It's great to catch up. Well played.
Thank you very much, Mark.
This has been a Fox Footy production, part of the Fox Sports Network.